Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, what an unusual third reading speech for a Minister of Finance and a Deputy Prime Minister. I mean, I'm sure people out there in TV land understand that third reading speeches are supposed to be where a senior minister takes a principled approach to summarising the reasons that a government is doing this or that piece of legislation, summarises the arguments for, and thus convinces the public. But what a bizarre effort. I mean, most of it was talking about the fact that the total number of pokies was falling under Labor's sinking lid, but of course Sky City's share is rising because this government doesn't like RSAs, it doesn't like the footy clubs, it doesn't even like the racing clubs, it doesn't like community gaming, it only likes it when it's big boys, wide boys gaming at the big end of town because that is their way, Mr Speaker. This government is not focused on building a productive economy that all New Zealanders can benefit from. It's focusing on feathering its own nest. You only got to read the paper to see how that party feathers their own nests, and they're feathering the nests of the big end of town with this legislation. And the name Sky City is entering into National's Hall of Shame alongside Warner Brothers, Media Works, Rio Tinto, the shabby Snapper deal, potentially Chorus if Mr Key gets his way, and of course the shame that we've heard about today with Pike River and the deal that's been cut for New Zealand Oil and Gas, who should have paid out those poor families. These are the companies that my opponent has done his deals with. He's sold the law, he's bailed out big business, and he's acted against the interests of New Zealand families. In the case, what do I say to Sky City? I say this to Sky City. We will not abide by the compensation clauses of that contract. We will regulate against gaming harm. We will preserve the mana and the authority of the New Zealand Parliament, and we will not do a dirty deal to indemnify money laundering and profiteering, which the Treasury and the Moby have said are at risk under this deal. That is what we will say to Sky City, Dr. Smith. And if you had been so awake, you would have banned shark finning months ago, Mr. Smith. And in the case of Sky City, the Prime Minister's personal style, if we can call it that, is on display for the world to see. Business calls him a map with no compass. He's known colloquially as Trader John, and there is nothing, sir, that he would not trade. Mr. Speaker, don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. Read the independent report by the Deputy Auditor General, because the Prime Minister's been up to his eyeballs in this deal. He kicked it off over a dinner with Sky City executives, and very soon after he intervened in the departmental process run by the Ministry of Business, and the Deputy Auditor General said this, that the process of Sky City getting the contract to build the convention centre was, quote, flawed, quote, not transparent or even-handed. The report established deficiencies on the part of both ministers and officials. The ministers, of course, were Mr Key and Mr Joyce, the maestro of business management. Mr Key said that he was totally vindicated by the report. He can't have read it. He can't have read it because there's no vindication in that. So what has the government actually agreed to? Well, there's a problem, Mr Speaker, because the public doesn't know, because the full text of this shady, shabby deal has never been made public. Now, there is an old saying in politics, which is that sunlight is the best disinfectant, Dr. Smith. I just did, Dr. Smith. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Table the deal.
That's right.
Table the contract. Let New Zealanders see it for themselves. And Minister, if you can't put up, button up. Because this is not something that the New Zealand public is prepared to put up with, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. This deal gives Sky City a substantial extension to the term of its licence. It allows 230 extra pokie machines, 40 extra gaming tables, a further 12 tables with a swap table that seats up to 20 players, 17% more electronic gaming machines, and the famous ticket-in, ticket-out gambling system, which allows, in the words of the Ministry of Business, potential money laundering. Potential money. Don't take it from us, take it from the Minister's own officials, warning about potential money laundering as a result of this shabby, shoddy, stinking deal. And Mr. Key met with Sky City repeatedly. He had 5 meetings in 2009. You can see the minutes. He said, you've got to close off the Sky City angle first before you involve any other bidders. I wonder what that meant, Mr. Speaker. And in June 2000, he said, my office has had no correspondence, no discussions and no involvement in the tendering process. That's pretty hard to reconcile when he's just instructed his own officials to close off the Sky City deal first. Well, we are learning a lot, Mr. Speaker, about the modus operandi of Trader John. Trader John, who would trade the law to a movie company, trade the law to a casino, send the RSAs and the footy clubs down the river as they endure the sinking lid, while the big end of town, the wide boys in their alligator shoes, they get preferential treatment from this nest-feathering nest of gnats. Nest-feathering nest of gnats. And this is a common problem with governments. It sets in normally in their 3rd term, but these folks have it early. Mr. Speaker, they've got it halfway through their 2nd term, and that's why their 2nd term, sir, will be the last. Because on the mantelpiece they may have the trophies of Warner Brothers, they may have the trophies of Sky City, but they won't have the confidence of the New Zealand public, Mr. Speaker. What would Labor do? Well, here is the clear message to the business community. Under Labor, there will be one set of rules for all again. Not one set for John Key's best mates and another for everybody else. You know, a CEO, sir, a prominent CEO came up to me and said, you know, the trouble with this Sky City deal is we don't know how to get business done in this town anymore. It seems like you've got to be a special friend of the government. Well, I know they've been out doing a lot of fundraising, Mr. Speaker, but that's no excuse for this kind of travesty. So Labor will regulate to prevent gaming harm. We won't compensate for the normal regulatory functions of government. Mr. Speaker, if the convention centre is half built, we're not going to dynamite it. We're not going to rip up the contract at that point, sir. But we will make sure that the proper anti-gaming functions of government are upheld, and there will be no compensation for the normal processes of government. That means no guarantee of extra gaming tables, no guarantee of extra pokies, certainly no guarantee of compensation, and we will regulate to protect New Zealanders. We will regulate to protect New Zealanders. Can't be any clearer than that, Mr. Speaker. If the National Party and their cronies can't understand that the incoming Labor government will stand up for the rule of law, the rule of law and the interests of New Zealand families, Mr. Speaker, then we can't help them. We can't help them, because it can't be a plainer distinction than that. The folks upstairs and the folks out in TV land understand that this is all about trading, about gambling. But it's gambling with New Zealanders' futures, Mr. Speaker, not just the Russian roulette in the gaming tables themselves, Mr. Speaker. Let's not gamble with New Zealand's future. Let's not set a precedent where we will once again sell the law to the big end of town. Let's preserve Parliament's right to regulate in the interests of all New Zealanders.
Jonathan Young.
Mr. Speaker, what is clear